Good evening, everybody. We're going to start with the program tonight. So just you can keep eating, but let's go ahead now. So good evening. My name is Edmundo Garcia Solis. I'm representing the National Society of Hispanic Physicists, and I start the program by calling to order the meeting. In this session, we're going to recognize some of our students, and at the end, we're going to have a presentation. So with nothing else, I introduce the president of the National Society of Black Physicists, Dr. Robinson.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. So this is our closing banquet. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being a part of a wonderful, wonderful conference. It's been 4 days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, of a lot of learning, a lot of professional development, hopefully some network building, and I hope that everybody got something out of the conference, made new connections, improved their networks, and overall had a positive experience. So on behalf of the National Society of Black Physicists and the National Society of Hispanic Physicists, I'd like to welcome you to this dinner, and thank you for attending the conference. Oh. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to recognize our current board members for both the National Society of Black Physicists and the National Society of Hispanic Physicists. So all current board members of either one of these organizations, please stand. I assume y'all are standing. It's really bright up here, so I can't really see anything. But the board members put in tireless amounts of work, and I think I need to tell you guys something that you might not know. All of these board members who put in these hundreds and hundreds of hours of work are not compensated 1 penny for their work. So all the hours that they put it in for free, for the love of the organization and for the potential that they see inside of the organization. And I think that deserves a round of applause. I would also like to recognize any past presidents and past officers of these organizations. So if there are any past presidents or past board members of either the National Society of Black Physicists or the National Society of Hispanic Physicists, please stand. Yeah, there were some people sitting down that I knew should have been standing up, so I'm glad they all stood up. And the current organizations stand on their shoulders in the progress that they made, and we are very appreciative of the work that they were doing. We'd also like to, the fellows of either one of these organizations, would you please stand? If you are a fellow of either the National Society of Black Physicists or the National Society of Hispanic Physicists, would you please stand? We'd like to recognize the organizing and program committee members of this conference. If you're on the programming committee or the organizing committee, please stand and receive your. This is another group of volunteers that are working tirelessly for free to put the conference together. So when you say, because everybody's coming up to me and saying, oh, thank you for putting on the conference. It's not just me. It's all of these guys putting in a mountain of work, uncompensated, to make this conference happen, and we are very appreciative. I'd like to honor our sponsors, partners, and exhibitors. So if you are a sponsor or a partner or an exhibitor, would you please stand? These are the people that are paying for the conference. Give them a round of applause. So at this time, I would like to recognize and thank our sponsors by name. So co-host is University of Houston. Funding partners is NASA and the Simons Foundation. Our platinum sponsors is Aura and NIST. Gold sponsors is APS. Silver sponsors, Rice University, NOAA, AIP Team Up Together, and the University of Chicago. Bronze sponsors, Morgan State University, FRIB, and Optica. On-site arrival sponsor is Jane Street. Those are the people who gave out the Rubik's Cubes that everybody's so hot for. Swag bag sponsors is University of Houston's Graduate School, and the lanyard sponsors is University of Houston's Department of Physics, College of Natural Sciences and Mathematics. We would also like to thank all 72 exhibitors for supporting this conference. Oh my God. Okay, so without further ado, it is time to hear from our keynote speaker, Dr. Camille Coffie. So please come on up.
Good evening. As stated, my name is Camille Coffie. I am the speaker for this evening's closing dinner. Just a little bit of information about me. I am currently a lecturer at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. I recently completed my PhD in physics at the University of Central Florida. Thank you. And while at UCF, I received funding through the APS Innovation Fund to start a project or study that I was very interested in that had to do with the experiences of Black women in physics PhD programs. So as we depart on this evening, I'd like to share some of that data and information from that study with you all, but even more, I want to talk about how important it is that we as a physics community come together and advocate for one another, especially those who may be marginalized or who may be underrepresented in the field. So the title of the project was A Journey to a PhD Through the Lens of Black Women in Physics. So I want to start out just giving a few statistics on where we are in physics in terms of degrees earned. Again, I'm a physics education researcher, so I often look at these numbers, but I forget some people don't, so I want to make sure that we all are aware of where we stand in terms of demographics and those who are graduating with or earning physics degrees. So if you look at the graph here, and this is all from AIP statistics, you can find this online, we see that the majority of people who are obtaining bachelor's degrees in physics are what we all already know, are white men, and then we also have that margin between the green bar, which is the US Census data for people ages, I think it's traditional college age, 18 to 24. And so they're comparing that green bar, which is the percentage or population of people in that age group, that traditional college age group, with how many men and how many women who have completed bachelor's degrees. And so I believe the red number is men and the blue number is women. So pay close attention to both the Black or African American and the Hispanic or Latino numbers. As you can see, the markers that we have for both men and women are much less than the overall percentage according to the US Census data. But for women, and particularly Black women, we see that number is very, very close to 0%. So that's one of the reasons why I was so interested in doing this research, because I definitely want to see a shift in those percentages. This is also a second look at it, which kind of breaks it down in terms of masters and PhDs as well. And so again, we see white people getting the majority of those degrees, masters, and PhDs in physics, followed closely by actually the Asian population is getting more PhDs and masters than their actual percentage population in that age group. And then finally, again, if we look at the black column, we see that there's a minimal number, again, close to 0%, who are receiving PhDs in physics. So the question that I often get asked is why explore the experiences of black women in physics graduate programs? The obvious answer is because I am one, but also because we represent the smallest percentage of the population who are receiving PhDs in physics. And it's very interesting comparatively to the overall number of black women who are receiving PhDs in other STEM fields, especially considering like the life sciences, natural sciences, those numbers are much greater. As a lecturer at Spelman, we pride ourselves in being the #1 producer of black women who go on to obtain PhDs in STEM courses out of all the universities. But again, the physics numbers are not quite there. So this study is just very important because #1, black women deserve to be able to go and study physics at any level, but especially the graduate level, in environments that are inclusive and that do not cause them psychological harm. We've also looked a little bit at prior research, which really focuses a lot on the resilience of black women, and that is something that we're trying to get away from, putting that burden of responsibility on black women to assimilate themselves into these programs and these spaces that are often not welcoming, and to put a burden of responsibility on the institutions to create spaces that would be more inclusive for us. In this study, I used what is called the photo voice method because much of the prior research had done very similar things with focus groups and interviews. I wanted to find a method that would give us a better insight, a more personal insight into the experiences of black women as they matriculate through these programs. So I chose to do the photo voice method, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but essentially it's a method where they were able to take pictures representing their path in their PhD programs, and through those pictures, we were able to reveal lots of information that did not just come from sitting down doing the interviews and focus groups. So we talked about this a little bit today in one of the sessions I was in. They talked a little, I think it was the anti-ableism session, and they did ask us if we were able to define intersectionality. And many of these terms are terms that you hear very often in the news right now. They're hot topics. But just to be clear, when we think about intersectionality, especially in terms of black women in physics, it's basically saying that the more identities that you carry, the more susceptible you are to being harmed. So many people will say, well, isn't grad school hard for everybody? Grad school is a challenge for everyone. What makes it so different for black women? And my response is always related to the fact that we do have this intersection that we stand at, where we're not only black, but we're also women. We may hold a disability. We may be part of the LGBTQ plus community. So with all of these identities, the isms, is what I like to call them, that we can be subject to increases, the racism, the sexism. So in terms of comparing the experiences of black women in physics programs to everyone overall, we have to take into account that black women share unique challenges and issues going into these programs. Additionally, historically, the role that black women have portrayed in America, the way that they have been portrayed in the media, as far as the stereotypes that have been thrust upon black women in terms of their intellectual abilities, the responsibilities they are to have to be caretakers, to be more matriarchs, to be more motherly, do not lean toward more of them being able to be physicists or be successful as physicists. And so many people still carry those stereotypes. In fact, I think the statistics say the majority of tenured professors at universities are going to fall in that age of 47 and above. which includes a lot of what we would call the baby boomer generation. The interesting thing about that generation is that many of them were cared for by Black women, or their parents were cared for by Black women who came into their homes and took care of the families for the families, the white families, while they were either working or just wanted the assistance of Black women in their homes to care for their children. With that being said, we do still have a pretty decent population of faculty and maybe administrators in U.S. institutions who may have grown up in those households where their prominent memories of Black women are enrolled as a server. And so now to ask those same individuals to work alongside a Black woman in a lab or a research environment and to see her as a colleague is sometimes very difficult. So we all have to do our part in making sure that we make people aware of these things and also challenge them to learn and progress and change in their thinking. This is just a slide that again just reinforces what I was just stating. Many people like to say that perhaps those numbers are low because Black women are just not cut out to be physicists. Maybe they're not smart enough, they're not good in math, they don't test well. All of these are things that have been proven through research to just simply not be true. A lot of the test scores, and people say standardized tests, Black women don't perform well. Well, we found through research that that is not the case, but instead we found that Black women actually experience a lot of what we call stereotype threat. And what that means is because they know that many people believe that they are not as capable, when they enter rooms to take these high-stakes exams, they experience a level of anxiety about perhaps embodying that very stereotype that people have about them that it sometimes causes them not to do as well. So when we look at this, we also see that for years, Black women as well as Black men, but Black people in general, were not afforded the opportunity to obtain education. When Black women did eventually start being able to attend various institutions and schools, they were often encouraged to go into education or more service-oriented fields. So we have a little work to do in just progressing everyone's thinking about what Black women can do and what they're capable of. So just to reinforce again, the purpose of this study for me and for the team that I was working with was really just to amplify the voices of Black women, to allow their experiences to be elevated and to be heard so that people would understand the experiences of Black women in these, particularly we focused on PhD programs. So just briefly, I'll talk a little bit about the data collection and analysis because I know most of you are not in physics education research, so some of the terminology may be new to you, but what we did is we first conducted a national recruitment where we made contact with various organizations and posted advertisements or recruitment ads to primarily, obviously, we wanted Black women. I think we said who were either currently in or had currently exited for various reasons their physics PhD programs. We ended up getting 13 participants from across the United States, and we were very pleased with that number because, as you know, there's just not very many Black women pursuing PhDs. That number is like less than 2%. So to be able to get 13 participants willing to share their experience with us was fantastic. Obviously, however, these participants were located everywhere, so we had to conduct most of the study online. It also gives a little breakdown about how many attended HBCUs. We had 10 who were bridge students, and we had 2 who had mastered out their programs and were currently working in industry, and then 11 who were currently enrolled. So the first part of the study, we had them to go and collect 10 photos that represented their journey. And as you see in the top corner, the prompt that they were to respond to is, as someone who identifies as a Black woman, take pictures of how you would describe your journey towards a graduate degree in physics. And so we received those photos, and after receiving the photos, we sat down individually with the participants and asked a series of questions that are known as the SHOWED approach. These are the questions that you see on the third bullet there. So it says, what do you see here? What is really happening here? How does it relate to our lives? And who does this situation concern or strength exist? And so the interesting thing is when we would ask these questions and show them the pictures, they would always be surprised at what was revealed in the pictures as they began to dialogue about it. So what I mean is initially they might have just taken a picture of a flower and thought, oh, I took a picture of this flower because it's a pretty flower. But as we really began to hone in and talk very descriptively about what was going in the picture, it began to really pull out more information, and sometimes it got very emotional about their experiences that perhaps many of the participants hadn't even realized. And so the last part is we did conduct focus group interviews where we had half of the group come together at one point, so we had like 2 or 3 focus groups because it was very difficult trying to get all their schedules in line, but also because, again, we were having participants from West Coast to East Coast. But we were able to successfully conduct the focus group interviews, which offered a plethora of information as well, because we found that when they were together and they had the supportive contact of their other graduate students or other Black women in graduate programs, they were really more candid and open and honest than they had been in the personal or individual interviews. And so we used what we call an inductive coding method here, and which means we just simply went through, analyzed the transcripts, went back and forth through them, and from those transcripts, certain themes just emerged. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is the 4 top things that emerged from those transcripts. Just real quickly, I talked already about this, so I'm going to kind of go through this slide, but this is just how we collected the data. Oh, and then a little bit about the photo voice method, just for those who are not aware. And if you're interested in the photo voice method, or is it something you might want to employ in a study, there is Photo Voice Worldwide organization online. You can look up. They have training courses and other information. But the key thing about the photo voice method and what I really liked is that the participants become co-researchers. So we didn't have 13 participants, we had 13 co-researchers because they become intrinsically involved in the data analyst process. So we take the pictures, but they give us the titles, they give us the interpretations, they tell us what the story is that they want to be told. And so it enables people to reflect on and record aspects of their own experiences. It was very important to me that the Black women in this study were able to control their own narrative. I did not want us to take their information and interpret it in ways in which maybe they had not intended. So the thing that I really enjoyed about the photo voice method is it gave them that opportunity to share their experiences through their own voices and in their own way. And so it promotes this critical dialogue and knowledge about important issues from their perspective. And then it provides a vision leveraging the participants' lives that might educate others. And so that was the primary purpose. We're not just like finding out, oh, what's going on with these young women in graduate school, but we're wanting to find this out so that we can educate others, so that people can be aware of these experiences. And for those who would like to join us and advocate for more supportive environments to be able to do so. So I'm going to introduce the 4 themes, and so I'm not going to take up too much of your time because I know many of you are anxious to get on about your evening, but I wanted to share a photo from each of the themes. And so the way this is going to work, I'm going to put up the photo, and then there's an adjacent question that asks you to spend about 30 seconds or so observing the photo and kind of giving your idea or your take on what you think this woman might have been trying to share with us through this photo. So this is a photo that represents the first theme. So as the prompt says, take a moment to reflect on the photo, and then ask yourself, or maybe even your neighbor, what might the connection between this photo and a Black woman's journey in her physics PhD program be? Okay, I hear a little rumbling. Let's see how many of you were correct in your assessments. I wish we could go around with a mic and get some of your commentary, but we're not able to do that. Okay, so if I can get your attention again. So the first thing is one that most of you probably could have guessed right off. It had to do with mental health and well-being. That was a theme that showed up through every transcript, every interview. And primarily due to the different forms of negative racialized experiences that these participants had in their programs, as well as the fact that just due to the status of Black women in America, and I don't mean the status, if you look at the statistics where Black women stand, they're not entering these programs with a clean slate. Many of them have already had to endure many injustices and be resilient through many challenges before they even got to these PhD programs. For many of them, their undergraduate programs were challenging. For many of them, their high school programs were challenging. For many of them, they are caregivers. They have children. They are the ones in the family that are the ones who are responsible for many things. So when we speak about these women and their well-being, it's very important to note that being in these graduate programs was supposed to be like a safe place for them. You always hear about the ivory towers and you think this is the place where I can go and I can study physics and something that I'm really interested in and in some way escape from the isms of this world. But for many of these participants, that just was not a reality at the time. And so the quote from this scripture, this picture, and yes, I am a church lady, so I say scripture, but the quote from this picture is great. So it says, time to kind of mourn, and these are the words from the participant, to mourn the experience that I wanted to have, that I was hoping for, not able to be myself, and not have to worry too much about all the isms, as I talked about earlier. But it's still very prevalent, all the racism and prejudices that happened at this time in my physics PhD program. So all of the tombstones are a portion of me that is grieving. So she went on to elaborate in the focus group about this photo, and they all agreed. And it was so interesting because they loved the photo and what it represented. Because for most of them, what it represented is how when they initially entered their PhD programs, they were full of excitement. They didn't know how it was gonna go, but they were hoping it was gonna be great. They had got accepted, and they were very optimistic. But as the program began to proceed and challenges began to come up, they started to mourn the loss of what they thought it was going to be like. They mourned the loss of the excitement and anticipation and expectation they had. Let's try the second theme. So here's another photo, and what might the connection between this photo and a Black woman's journey in her physics PhD program be? All right, did you guess it? So hint, hint, there's a stone missing from this diamond ring. And so one of the second themes that was very prevalent was interactions with faculty. Some people asked, well, were there any positive interactions? Absolutely. There were a couple of positive. I'm not going to say there were more positive interactions than negative, because unfortunately for this study, we did have more negative interactions than positive. However, there were some positives, but for this particular photo, the participant was discussing how the reason that they shared this photo of the ring is because it was a ring that they had received from their mother, and even though one of the stones was missing, it reminded her of how much of a rough time she had had in academia, yet even though she had had a rough time, she was still able to shine brightly like the rest of the diamonds on the ring. She was still being resilient. Third thing, take a moment, you know the routine. Discuss what you think might be the connection between this photo and a Black woman's journey in her physics PhD program. Everybody thinks it's painful. They see the dentist's tools, but that was not exactly it. The third thing that we saw had to do with finances. So yes, this is a picture of the dentist's office, and obviously it may have been a painful experience, but that was not the indication of why she took the photograph. The photograph had to do with the fact that she actually, and this is one of our participants who had mastered out, did not have the finances to see a dentist regularly for the things that she needed to see, for dental work that she needed while she was in grad school. And so she just makes a comment about how, even though she had her basic needs met, she really couldn't afford to do anything wrong, or for anything to go wrong, like a car need repair, or to get cavities, or anything that needed additional funds, because she just did not have it during her grad school time. All right, thing 4, and I tried my best to blur this candidate out, so hopefully no one knows her. So take a moment again. If you can't see because of the shadow, one side of her hair is in a big afro, the other side is in box braids. Microaggressions. So when I showed hair, I know many of the black women in the room probably knew exactly where this was going. But she talks a little bit about how when she initially came on campus for her program, they were taking an initial photo, a welcome everybody in, and she was wearing her natural hair out at the time in a big afro. As a result, she received a few subtle comments about how big her hair was, how it was in the way, suggesting that perhaps she should have worn it a different way for the photo. Obviously, that wasn't an option at the time, so that was something that she mentioned in the interviews that kind of started out her experience in grad school on a little down note. Additionally, she went further to talk about how in her laboratory she had to go into a clean room, and they had caps that you were supposed to wear, but they did not fit over her natural hair. So every time she had to prepare for lab, she would have to spend hours braiding her natural hair into box braids or some style that would fit underneath the caps. And so one of the really pointed statements that she made about this is how it made her realize in that moment that they had not prepared for someone like her in that program or in the lab. And she realized in that moment as well that at the time that they were establishing this lab, no one had even probably thought that eventually we may have a black woman come through here that wants to wear her natural hair, and we need to have some supplies or resources available for her to be able to do so. The last part of the talk is just a little bit about one of the strongest stereotypes that played over and over again during the experiences of many of the participants. So we have seen this very prevalent stereotype even now with many of the black women who we, notably our recent presidential candidate and others, this strong black woman trope, which says and believes that black women are to endure beyond measure, that no matter what you pile on our plates, we can take it. And so that persisted throughout all of the interviews, and to be honest, it was also a very often a source of a lot of the mental health and well-being issues that the participants had during their time in their programs. To put it bluntly, they were all trying to live up to the strong black woman stereotype that had been embedded in many of them since very small girls. They were always told to keep your chin up, keep it moving. You're a little black woman, you're gonna be a black woman, you can't depend on a person to do this or to do that for you. We've always taken care of ourselves, we've always taken care of our families, we've always did what needed to be done. And so for many of the women in the study, when we were thinking about not only the themes that were coming out, we just repeatedly kept hearing them talk about this overwhelming sense that they needed to be doing more, that there was something more they could do or something they should have done better at. And so it was very interesting to try to talk to them about the fact that at the end of the day, it is not something that we need to change or need to do to become better physicists, but it's an institutional change that also needs to take place and that it should be more the priority. And so in this example, we have a participant that we're calling Nicole. They all had pseudonames. And she just makes a statement that we all resonated with. And she was saying, where is the break for like Black women in physics? Because even after you get the PhD, even after you get the job, if you get the job in academia, it feels like there's no break. All these other people that are causing all this anti-Blackness, all this racism, all these people reviewing you and letting you, telling you whether or not you can get tenure. And so I think when I hear people be like, oh, just be strong, because a lot of them were told that when they brought up issues in their department, they were pretty much told, get over it, you can do it, be strong. She's like, be strong to what end? When do we get to rest? And also from the focus groups, same thing arised, and they were just talking about, I know that we're supposed to be doing this, but I just don't know what to make of it. I made it, but at what cost? Is it worth it? Is it worth my mental health? Is it worth the strain that it's taking on me, even physically? And then another participant goes on to say, yeah, I agree. I feel like when people think of Black women, they're like, oh, you're so strong because of all these struggles that you go through. But I feel like you shouldn't have to go through those struggles. And yes, it's worth it, but in the end, we're picking up the pieces of ourselves to put it back together, and I feel like that's just really unfair to us. And so as I close, I just want to leave a few recommendations. We have many more, and I will leave some information where you can scan the code and also contact an email address if you'd like to get more information on the study, because we're not quite finished. We're wrapping it up in December. But some of the recommendations that came out of the study were to increase the amount of training and awareness to faculty, PIs, advisors, other people who work directly with Black women in physics PhD programs. Also providing additional mental health support. Many of them talked about their campuses having counselors and the like, but many of them were not women of color, did not understand the intricacies of being the only Black woman in, or one of very few in their programs. Course policy and advocacy to implement policies that promote diversity and inclusion, to ensure that Black women have equal opportunities to participate in fellowships, research, assistantships. Number 4, and I'll explain it just a little bit, widening perspectives on graduate physics students' roles and responsibilities. Many people we found have a very narrow view of what a physics graduate student should look like and do. They're centering the traditional physics student, which may be a person from a privileged background coming into a graduate program, no responsibilities, no children, they don't have to work, all of these things which many of our participants had to contend with. So we are urging faculty and those who are in positions of power to recenter their focus from, all of these students are coming in with a similar background and situation, and understand that for Black women in particular, there could be a different dynamic of challenges and roles and responsibilities they have at home and within their families. And then more support from the physics community is what we're asking for. So if you are a friend, if you are a student, if you are a faculty member, if you are an admin, whatever role you play in your institution or your corporation, especially those who have positions of power to make change in your various institutions, we're asking that you would advocate for Black women so that we don't always have to be strong and have to be resilient. And the bottom is just a quote that I found to kind of sum things up as to why we are doing this work. And it says, only by shining a light on issues and discussing the necessary changes can we hold both individuals and employers accountable for improvement and make places psychologically safer for Black women. This is my project team, Dr. Jackie Cheney, who is now at The Ohio State University, myself, Dr. Atunu Isalami, who is at a professor of social work at the University of Northern Iowa, and then Trenton Marsh, who is also at the University of Central Florida. My advisory board members, at least one of them who was here today, Dr. Geraldine Cochran from the Ohio State University, Dr. Jamie Valentine Miller from the African American Women in Physics founder and the U.S. Patent Office, Dr. Claudio Mathis, Michigan State, and Kat Marie Rosa from the University of Brazil. Now, last things, we have a webinar coming up, so I'm going to give a little advertisement for that, where we're talking a little bit more about some of the photos. We have multiple photos that I did not share today, so we're going to talk more about those. If you'd like to register, you can scan that QR code, or you can search it on the APS website. And then my information, how to contact me personally, is at the bottom, as well as the email address for the project. Now, any questions for me at this time? I think we have a few minutes maybe for Q&A. Okay, just a couple of questions, if there are any.
One here.
Okay.
Hey, sis. Spelman College, class of
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
Met you earlier. Thank you. That's nice. So I don't want to ask a loaded question, but it might be loaded. So from your research, there are Black women that go into hardcore physics where they study and continue to do research in physics, having physics degrees. But then there are women that go into education, leadership, branch out. So in your data that you were, presenting, did you have some type of correlation matrix to kind of speak to why Black women kind of go from hard research, like at the National Lab, for example, I'm at Lawrence Livermore, shameless plug, that's where I'm at, into education? And is there maybe some type of correlation between the microaggressions in academia that it is in industry or national labs, for example?
That is a loaded question.
Sorry,
but
I can't help it.
I think it's more than one question in one. But for the first part, you were asking, why do I think more Black women tend to use their physics degrees in academia more so than what you would consider hardcore physics?
Yes.
I haven't really noticed that trend. Honestly,
Okay.
I feel like we don't have enough Black women that go back into the colleges and universities to teach, so that we can have more role models for our students at Spelman. I think we have, and we were just talking about this the other day, we have now 3 Black women faculty members, which probably is the most ever anywhere. So I'm not sure, but I do know historically Black women have always valued education to the point where we would learn to read and write from our slave masters or enslavers' children, and then take that information home and teach a whole community. And so we've had that in us, just for years and generations. So perhaps that is something that we have learned from our mothers and grandmothers and on back, to be the kind of people who want to share and give knowledge. But that's just my opinion. I don't know statistically that I know any information about that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Yes. Hi. My name is Emmanuel. I'm from Howard University. So my question is, how do we start fighting internalization at the root level, most especially at the elementary and primary school level? Because that's when we start telling kids that, oh, you're a man or you're a woman, you don't behave like this, you have to do this. So it's like, if I'm supposed to be like this, come jump in my skin and act like such, So how do we start fighting that at the very root level to encourage any individual at all to self-determination on whatever they want to pursue in life?
I would just say doing what you're doing, like just letting them know, just telling them. If I understand your question, you're just asking me, how do we communicate to younger children, right, that they have the ability to be whomever they choose to be? Yeah. So I think we communicate that through our words and through our actions. So yes, by verbally saying that, but also presenting models before them, by you being true to yourself and by those around them being true to themselves. Yeah.
Thank
While
you
I
so
have
much.
a minute, and before we finish the questions, I did want to acknowledge all of the Black women physicists in the room. Like, we have quite a few. So I'm going to start with, if you can, and I know they're probably like, I don't feel like standing up. But if you have a PhD in physics, Black women, could you please stand so we can applaud you? Because y'all were making it through a time when things were a little bit more difficult than they are now. Dr. James, my Black women PhD earners, could you please stand? Thank you, thank you. What about I'm gonna still, and I'm not a person who believes you have to have a PhD to be a physicist, so my master's degree and bachelor's degrees in physics as well. Can you please stand so we can applaud you? Thank you. Y'all can get me afterwards. Well, my time is complete, and thank you all for standing. My time is complete, I believe, unless there was one last question, but I can't see because the light is here. But is there one last question?
I have one over here. I have one over here.
Hello, my name is Michael Williams. I represent Optica. I have actually two questions. It'll be fast. One was for the photo voice. Were there any particular women that gave positive reinforcement, positive experiences in their submissions regarding their experiences? Because I just believe that if you leave a message saying that all the women that participated gave negative experiences, negative images, they may prohibit even more Black women into pursuing careers in physics. And secondly, can this presentation be presented in a way that you can say this to non-Black scientists in a forum like this? Because I believe a lot of the information you gave, a lot of us already know. And I feel that this will be beneficial for people who don't know all the facts you have been given.
Information that they didn't know, right? And so, like, maybe next time they could just come to this conference, and if she gave it again, you know, then they would get that information that way, right? And she did answer during the talk. There was positive pictures, and she chose these four to focus on. You may want to talk to her afterwards if you still need a positive one.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Well, just to add to that, I understand your concern, and it's my concern also. As a mentor and a person who advocates for Black women earning PhDs in physics, I dislike that, unfortunately, in this study, this was the data. And as a researcher and a responsible researcher, I have to share the information that I was given. I can't add to it or take it away. As far as the photos, all of the photos we collected at that time for those participants were reflective of not so positive experiences. While we did have some participants to report a couple of positive experiences with PIs and other faculty, they did not take photographs of those. They chose to take photographs of the experiences that they chose, and we did not deter them from doing that. And as far as this whole talk being something that might deter Black women, I don't necessarily see it in that way. I see it as informing them and making them aware of the challenges they may face in their programs, but it won't deter them if they have the passion and the interest to do it. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all of you. Yes, I think I'm gonna have to go. Yes, thank you.